Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of the Ring the Bell podcast. I'm your host, David Esser, Sixers staff writer here with the Philly Sports Network. And man, do we have a lot to talk about today. Like a ton to talk about. When I first developed the idea for this podcast, this show, a big concern of mine with doing a specific NBA-specific podcast was, is there going to be enough content? I didn't want to spend all my time talking about the Lakers or the drama with Kawhi Leonard or, who's dating who in the NBA. I'm not into all that. I wanted to talk Sixers basketball, the schematics, the coaching decisions, the numbers. My fear was there going to be enough? Starting the podcast, early January, playoff hunt isn't here yet. No big trades have happened yet. The Sixers roster looks pretty stable for the most part. There's going to be no blockbuster trades like they were last year. So was there going to be enough content for me to discuss? They've done a phenomenal job. Well, whether positive or negative, the Sixers have given me an abundant amount of material to discuss. And just in the one and a half week that I've started the show, I've had so much to talk about. Last week, 4-game losing streak, 2 losses against 2 really bad teams. We're going to trade Al Horford. We're going to trade Al Horford away. We have all these crazy rumors. This week, Joel Embiid, I'm sure you've all seen by now, Joel Embiid, going to miss at least a month of basketball with his finger injury. We then go out and beat the Celtics convincingly. There's a whole new set of trade rumors, this time around Ben Simmons going off to Golden State. We'll get to that later in the show, which is, make a long story short, that's not going to happen, but we'll get to that later in the show. But then you have a whole nother long list of trade targets that publicly were released. These aren't trade machine rumors. No, these are legit reporters coming out and saying the Sixers have officially inquired about X, Y, and Z players. We'll get to all of that. It's a lot to talk about. Super excited. Before we jump into that, I would like to make a statement. As the official host and owner of the Ring the Bell podcast, I would like to publicly declare on this date, January 10th, 2020, Jadeveon Clowney, defensive end of the Seattle Seahawks, you are public enemy number 1 of the podcast. You are not our friend. We do not like you. Public enemy number 1 of the podcast. Now, I know not everyone listening is going to be a Sixers and an Eagles fan. Bear with me. I'm still emotional. I'm still upset over the ordeal. Last Sunday, Eagles-Seahawks, home playoff game, first quarter, Jadeveon Clowney, cheap shot to our quarterback, my franchise quarterback, Carson Wentz, puts him out for the game. I will never forgive Clowney for what he did. Go Packers this weekend. But I digress. Now, props to the Sixers. They actually did a good job of timing their success when it comes to Philadelphia sports. If the Sixers had extended their losing streak to 5 games following that Eagles playoff loss, I don't know what I would have done. I would have freaked out. So props to the Sixers. They showed up when we needed them most. Monday night, I'm talking about Monday night, Oklahoma City Thunder at home came in. We beat a good Oklahoma City Thunder team, first of all. That is a very good basketball team. They are doing a phenomenal job with the pieces they have, considering how much they traded away this past offseason. They moved Paul George and Russell Westbrook. They've done a phenomenal job. It's less of a rebuild and more of a retool with Oklahoma City. They've managed to surround young players with good, solid veterans while also adding an absurd amount of draft picks. This is like the process times 10. So this was a good win. So we ended our 4-game losing streak. 76ers won that game 120-113. Fun fact about the Thunder and the Sixers, the Thunder were actually on a 10-game winning streak when they played the 76ers in Philadelphia. That seemed, when I first saw that statistic, that seemed surreal to me, that the Thunder have consistently owned us in our own building for so long. So props to the roster and Brett Brown for making a statement against a team that not only were they hot, they were coming in on a 5-game win streak, and again, we were coming in on 4 losses, but a team that significantly outplayed and outcoached us in recent years. So why did we win, and why was this such a big win for us? Well, first of all, we shot over 50% from both the field and the three-point line. Now, the 76ers have shot over 50% from beyond the arc 4 times this year. In those 4 games, they are 3-1. Yes, that is a small sample size, but that is a significant statistic. 75% of the time, make that clear, the 76ers win the game when they shoot over 50% from beyond the arc. It's no secret that shooting has been this team's issue this year. The floor spacing has been off. Simply put, they probably didn't do enough in the offseason to replace losing J.J. Redick in terms of how valuable he was with his shooting. I mean, he was so special from beyond the arc that he almost took up 2 3-point shooter spots. Instead of having 2 role players who can shoot, you just hook J.J. Redick out there and he'll make enough threes to compensate both of that. So the team, it's been talked about to death, about adding shooters, trading for shooters, who they should have signed in free agency to compensate said shooters. So it's not a big surprise. Outside of the shooting, the team is pretty well constructed. I mean, they're phenomenally defensively. They rebound well. And they have multiple guys who can score the basketball. Big problem's been the shooting, so when this team makes their shots, when you have guys like Korkmaz step up, make some shots, when you have a guy like Mike Scott make some shots, when your stars, Tobias, Josh Richardson, Al Horford, if they can add a few threes once in a while, this team's going to win the majority of their basketball games. So it's good to see that. It's good to see them shoot well against a team that's been playing great defense all year. Another big reason this was a fantastic team win was they posted 31 team assists. Again, with a lot of complaints about spacing and flow and offensive scheme. Can the team fit together? Can they not fit together? 31 team assists. All 5 starters scored in double figures. And Trey Burke contributed 12 off the bench. This was a great example of a night where everybody clicked. Where they were moving the ball together. They were setting up each other. They were making shots they needed to make. And add on top of that, you even got contribution from a bench player, which has been the other big thing outside of the shooting the team has lacked this year. So I'm personally, when we won that game, I tweeted right after, I said, this is a great win against a good basketball team. Thunder are no joke. I think as I'm recording this, last time I checked, they're sitting in a playoff spot. I mean, they run 3 deep at point guard, a position we struggle to defend. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chris Paul, and Dennis Schroeder, and we did a good enough job on those 3. I think Dennis Schroeder gave us a little bit of issues, but you're not going to stop all 3 of them at once. But, 3 deep at point guard, and we kept them in check. They have a great role-playing center in Steven Adams. He rebounds well. He plays defense well. He operates well in the pick and roll. And then they have Danilo Gallinari who can just flat-out score the basketball. So for us to make a statement against a team that was hot when we were ice cold, good team win overall. Now, of course, in typical Philadelphia sports fashion, we could never have, our highs can never get too high, but our lows will always get low enough. So, of course, I'm talking about, although it was a great win against the Thunder on Monday night, the big takeaway was Joel Embiid very grotesquely snapping his, I believe it was his ring finger on his left hand, bent completely in the wrong direction. What my first perspective, I was watching the game on my laptop, was it looked broken. He went to the locker room. They popped it back into place initially thinking it was dislocated, which is not that significant of an injury. Taped it up. He went back out there on the game. He was a warrior. Came in, won the basketball game. We're all praising Embiid for being tough. Now, in the press conference, he starts clarifying that it's still hurting him quite a bit, that he couldn't move his hand. We all start getting the vibe. This is going to be a little more serious. So he gets reevaluated, and what do we know? He had, and I'm going to quote this. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know what all these words mean, but I'm going to quote it directly from the 76ers website. Quote, a torn radial collateral ligament in the 4th metacarpal in his left hand. So, more or less in common speak, he tore a ligament right under that finger where it connects into the hand in his left hand. So that's obviously significantly more serious than just a dislocated or even a broken finger. Torn ligament, soon after it was announced he was gonna opt to get surgery, which all things considered sounds like the right move. You don't want a case where he prolongs surgery, tries to fight through it, comes back, and then just re-injures it. So get his surgery, rest up. Now's not the time to push it. We still got multiple months before the playoff push happens. So he's going to get surgery, and then they announced he was going to be reevaluated in 1 to 2 weeks. You read that, and you're thinking, surgery, 1 to 2 weeks. That seems unlikely. Now, a reevaluation obviously isn't the same as him coming back. They're just going to check to see his progress. But I went and did my own research on it. We're looking at probably a 1 to 2 month range. Dr. Eric Strauss of the Virtua Hospital, he's the chief of hand surgery there. He was questioned about it, and he answered saying, for an athlete, it's probably 4 to 8 weeks recovery time, considering Joel Embiid's health history and the Sixers' medical staff history. I would opt to push it more towards the 8-week range and less the 4-week range. I think they're going to be very careful with him. There's no reason to push him right now, especially considering it's a hand injury where you kind of need your hand to play basketball. You don't want him going out there continuously getting a partially recovered finger bashed up against other players and risk re-injury as we get closer to May and June. So yeah, like I said, Philly sports can never get too high. I like to, kind of a running joke, I like to compare this to some of the other Philadelphia sports teams and their injury history. You look back on the Phillies this year. You know, we signed Bryce Harper. Everyone's on top of the world, highest of highs, and then the entire bullpen gets injured. The entire bullpen. You look at the Eagles. We finally get everybody healthy. Carson Wentz is going to play a full 16 games. He does it. What happens? Everybody else gets injured. Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks. So, obviously this one hurts. Runs with the trend. This is nothing new for Philadelphia sports fans. This is nothing even really new to Sixers fans. Embiid specifically has battled his fair share of injuries the last couple of years. It shouldn't have any serious long-term effects, so I'm less worried about... I'm confident he's going to be back for the playoffs, and he's going to be 100% for the playoffs. If he continues, there's no reason he should stop doing conditioning work. He can still be on the court. It's his off-shooting hand. It shouldn't affect his shot when he comes back. I'm confident he'll be in shape and ready for the playoffs. I think he's too much of a competitor. I think the team's going to emphasize his recovery too much to make sure he's 100% for the playoffs. It'll probably hurt our seeding in the long run. We're not going to be... the number 2 seed looking less and less realistic. I think the number 3 seed we can seriously get as long as people play up to expectations. Without Embiid, the number 2 seed would be challenging. I've pretty much written off the number 1 seed. We're not catching the Bucks. So what does this mean for the rest of the roster? Obviously, anytime a star player gets hurt, you have questions, and I think most other teams, their best player gets hurt. I'm not sure how they survive. You look at Milwaukee, if Giannis goes down, they're going to plummet for 2 months. You look at the Heat, if Jimmy Butler goes down, they're going to struggle real hard for 2 months. Dallas with Luka, even the Lakers, if LeBron decides to take 2 months off, Anthony Davis is great, but they're still going to struggle. I think the catch with the Sixers, and this goes back to where the roster construction wasn't all that terrible outside of the shooting. The lack of shooting is gross, but the rest of the roster construction makes a lot of sense. This is why we signed Al Horford. This is the reason. If Al Horford, because I look at my last podcast, I was extremely critical of Al Horford. I wanted to ship him out. I was ready to ship him out for whoever. He's been so bad for us recently. This is 100% why we signed Al Horford. It's why he came to the team, I believe. I think he knew he would get some serious minutes and get the ball more than he did in Boston once in a while. This is it. This is his role. Now, we're going to get to the Celtics game later because I'm sure most of you watched the Celtics game. If not, I'll recap the whole thing for you. But Al Horford was great. He was involved offensively. He was great defensively. He got more rebounds than he normally has. He got some steals, got some blocks. That's the Al Horford we need to see these next 2 months. And realistically, this team isn't going to go down that major skid that other teams would do if their best player went out because we have Al Horford. Now, we're going to need greater contributions from Ben Simmons and Tobias and Josh Richardson. We need everyone scoring to jump up a little bit. But this team could very realistically not skip a beat. Because, how many other rosters in the NBA are in a position where they can lose their best player and replace him with an all-star in that same position? And I think we've all seen Al Horford's not a power forward, he's a center. So he now gets 2 months to play center on the best roster he's probably ever been a part of. He's never played with a point guard as good as Ben Simmons. I don't think he's ever been surrounded by 2 scorers as good as Tobias Harris or Josh Richardson before. And I don't think he's ever been a part of a defense as good as the one he's on right now. So this is Al Horford's. Our future the next 2 months rests solely in the hands of Al Horford. You asked me 2 weeks ago if I would have been excited about this. I've been terrified. After the Boston game, I'm on board with it. I really think he can do it the next two months. What that means specifically for Horford and his future with the Sixers is now we obviously can't trade him. The pipe dream of a big blockbuster CJ McCollum trade or D'Angelo Russell trade or whatever the trade machine tells you can do with trading Al Horford is not going to happen. He's going to be too valuable as the team's center going forward. Even if they feel like packaging him away might help us long-term, which it probably still would. I think long-term getting a CJ McCollum still helps us more than keeping Al Horford. But for the next 2 months, it's all about seeding. It's all about staying in the playoff picture, getting as many home games as you can in the playoffs. They're not going to sacrifice that by trading away Al Horford right now. It just doesn't make any sense. So this is going to be a blessing in disguise for the front office and Horford and their relationship. This is his chance to prove the front office was correct. And this now gives Al Horford a chance to cement his status as a 76er and silence some of the trade critics. Now, this injury affects more than just Al Horford, of course. Norval Pell, who's on a 2-way contract at the moment, 26-year-old rookie center, he played last night and he was pretty good against the Boston Celtics. And he's looking like he's going to cement himself as the backup center. Kyle O'Quinn's not very good, and he's expensive, and that's salary we could probably shed. Whereas Norval Pell, they have to make a decision on him relatively soon on if they want to promote him to the main roster. I think they're going to do it. He's too good defensively, and he is too energetic on the court to warrant moving him or sending him back down to Delaware. So this is going to be, again, a blessing in disguise for Norval Pell. Here's your chance. Be the backup center. You're going to get 10 minutes a night, block 2 shots a night, get 5 rebounds, and you're good to go. You're going to have a spot on this team going forward. I think the other player this is going to drastically affect is Ben Simmons. Ben's going to have an opportunity. And I hear a lot of, Ben plays better with Embiid. Embiid ruins the spacing for Simmons. He can operate that. I don't know. I don't know about all that. Horford's going to pretty much be that same guy, a center in the middle. Like, you have to have a center on the court. We saw Ben Simmons play kind of that point center role against Boston, and it didn't particularly work. We were just too small. I think Ben still operates better with the ball in his hand. But he's going to have an opportunity where he's going to get more shots. And he's going to have the ball in his hand more than he would when Embiid's on the court. And he's going to have a chance to operate with a more pick-and-roll-esque point guard. He's going to have a chance to operate with a more pick-and-roll-esque center in Al Horford, where Al Horford tends to operate better in the pick-and-roll, play a little more up-tempo, run the floor a little bit more, play to his strengths and his athleticism more so as hucking the ball in the post to Embiid and everyone kind of standing around once in a while. Not that doesn't work at points. Embiid's probably the best post scorer in the NBA. I don't even know what, probably he is the best post scorer in the NBA. But for Ben Simmons specifically, he might be able to thrive in these next 1 to 2 months in playing up-tempo, playing with a center who can space the floor a little bit better, and having the ball in his hand more often. I've been mentioning it, so let's finally dive into the 76ers win over the Boston Celtics, and man, was that a good one. I am personally the last couple years have been so tired of the Celtics fans and their obsession with their record over us and how they own us, and they beat us in the playoffs 2 years ago. How Brad Stevens is such a wonder boy, and Kyrie, and then Kemba, and blah blah blah. And this is now the first time since maybe 2013 where I can definitively tell you all and inform you without a doubt the 76ers are a significantly better basketball team than the Boston Celtics. They have more talent. They play with more energy. They have a better defense. And I would go as far as to say they're even better coached. As much as the league loves Brad Stevens, the last 4 games, Brett Brown has outcoached him and beat him. That is correct. 76ers are 4-0 in their last 4 matchups with the Celtics, including 3 wins this year, which of course gives them the series win on the entire season. But anyways, outside of the series victory, this was a fantastic win for the team. Final score was 109-98. Josh Richardson led all scorers with 29. Simmons had 19 and 9 boards. Al Horford, as we mentioned earlier, had his best game as a 76er since that matchup against the Suns back in early November. He had a near triple-double, 17 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. This was a great win. It showed that even without Embiid, this is still a good basketball team. And even without Embiid, they still have the star power to beat deeper rosters. The Celtics are incredibly deep. They run about 7-8 deep of legit NBA players. No weird guys on minimum contracts or flyers. These are 7 or 8 legit NBA players who would start on most teams. And the game started off, Boston was hot. They came out, and typical, I feel like this happens every time we play Boston. They just come out and they're making everything. Kemba Walker hit his first 3. I think it might have even been 4 threes. Marcus Smart was 5 for 6 from 3 at one point. I mean, they started off the game shooting over 60% from 3 through the first quarter. Boston was making everything. They pushed their lead all the way up to, I believe it was either 13 or 15 at one point in the second quarter. I tweeted out, I thought the game was over. I thought, no Embiid. Horford wasn't playing exceptional in the first half. Simmons wasn't doing a whole lot. Tobias hasn't really gotten a rhythm. This game's over. Boston's too deep. Jason Tatum hasn't even warmed up yet. This is a loss. And the panic around the Embiid injury is just going to get drastically overblown. But again, this team was resilient, and they fought back. And it was a combination of the stars putting their heads down and saying, hey, I'm going to start scoring some points. Josh Richardson was phenomenal in the pick and roll. Ben Simmons started pushing up and down. He played absolutely incredible defense and forced a lot of chaos on that side of the things. Al Horford started demanding the ball in the post, which I need to see more from him. He's so good in the post offensively, and he doesn't give himself enough credit. He can, especially against the Celtics, what they have Daniel Tice on you. I don't even know if that's his first name, Tice or Cantor on you. You're going to blow by him every time. And he started doing that, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. Guys started making shots. Korkmaz hit some threes. Ennis hit some threes. Trey Burke got some good minutes. It was, Norval Pella, as we mentioned earlier, he came in, he had 2 huge blocks, 2 huge rejections. So the team was resilient. They pushed it all the way back. They took the lead. They extended things enough in the fourth quarter for it to be out of reach. There was a few clutch buckets all around. Tobias had 1. Simmons had 1. Al Horford had a nice post fadeaway. The matchup with the Celtics, the most comparable game I can think of outside of the other 2 Celtics games was the Christmas Day win over the Milwaukee Bucks. This was on national television. Everyone was watching because of the Embiid injury. Everyone kind of wrote us off because Embiid was out. The old Tatum's better than Simmons argument. Jaylen Brown's a, quote, superstar. They're so deep, Brett Brown's an inferior coach to Brad Stevens, blah, whatever. They shoot the ball better. Similar to the Bucks game. Everyone thought Giannis was going to drop 60 points on us. Everyone thought the Celtics were. I thought the Celtics were going to blow us out last night, and they didn't. And the Sixers again proved that as disinterested or lackluster as they look and play at points in the regular season, whether it's against the Magic or the Suns or the Pistons, whoever they lose to, then at the end of the day, when it's time to show up, when it's time to play against a big-time opponent in the Bucks or the Celtics or the Heat or the Raptors, they're going to show up. 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10, they're going to show up. So I thought, great win. That's 2 great wins in 1 week. The team can build momentum on this. They can start pushing forward. They can start looking to build a win streak. They play Dallas this weekend. That's another huge test. When I look at the big tests they faced this week or this season, you had Milwaukee at Christmas Day, Boston season opener, Boston without Embiid, Boston without Horford, the first home game against Miami, and now Dallas. And they've for the most part knocked off each test game and proved, hey, we are a playoff team. We're built for the playoffs. Brett Brown said, hey, I can coach high pressure games. So this is good. All around positive vibes. Even with the Embiid injury, I'm confident that the combination of Horford and other players stepping up. I mean, again, Josh Richardson, 29 points. He significantly outplayed Kemba Walker. That's not easy to do. Kemba's great. He stepped up in Embiid's absence. And now for my favorite part of every week, of the podcast, of the show, it is Q&A time. Now, I think what I've decided in the last 5 minutes is we're going to need a name for the Q&A time. Like question time with Dave or Q&As with, find me a question or find me a name for the question, the Q&A time. If you think of something, throw it to me on Twitter. I want to brand this, get a hashtag going. I want more questions from you guys. Got a couple this week, which are incredible questions. I'm excited to talk about them. Most of them were questions I myself have, things I was already going to research and talk about. So if you contributed on the questions, appreciate you. That's awesome. Let's get more questions in. Let's get a name. Let's get a brand going. All that fun stuff. I think interacting with you guys it's genuinely one of my favorite parts of the recording of the week on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever you can reach me. Get those questions in. With that said, we have 2 questions this week, and they're pretty much on the same topic, so I'm going to lump them together, and then we're going to expand on the entire topic together and the subject. But the first question from my man Robert on Twitter, at Robert WIII, he says, quote, "We already have a bunch of mid-level guys. What's the point in bringing in another mid-level, just okay shooter type of guy?" That was in response to me expressing my interest in Davis Bertans. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but Bertans from the Washington Wizards. And then the second question from Tim Halsey on Facebook, he goes, quote, "Do you think they will make any trades and mortgage the future for this year?" So those obviously go hand in hand. First part of that is, do I think they will make any trades? And then the second part is, why even make those trades? Why go out and, someone mentioned this on my Twitter, is why even put Brett Brown through the pain of adding yet another piece to this roster? Since he took over as head coach, it's been a revolving door of new guys on his team. And it's obviously taken a toll on him in the offense. I mean, last year, the big blockbuster trade is Jimmy Butler. Okay, that's the star. That's who we have to adjust to. And then a month later, they had Tobias Harris, and they said, hey, Brett, go add in another star. Figure out how Tobias Harris fits into the team. So, with that in mind, do I think they'll make any trades? Absolutely. If they don't add at least one player, I will be genuinely shocked. It might not be in a trade. It could be in a buyout. My guess is it's going to be a trade. Just because teams are starting to figure out how valuable some of their veterans are. I mean, I heard earlier in the year that the Grizzlies wanted a first-round pick for Andre Iguodala, and most likely they'll probably get it. Might not be from us, but it could be from the Clippers or the Lakers or the Raptors or one of the many teams in title contention. So do I think they'll make a trade, mortgage the future for this year? They will make a trade. I wouldn't say they're mortgaging the future. They actually have a lot of draft picks further down the road that are expendable. I mean, how many second-round picks can we continuously add to this roster? We have first-round picks down in the G League that we can't even use. Zaire Smith has no spot on this team now that Matisse Thybulle has taken over that role. Now, names that have come up in that kind of trade conversation, they've been Davis Bertans, Andre Iguodala, Robert Covington, yes, Rocco, Glenn Robinson III, Etuan Moore, Marcus Morris, and Malik Beasley. Of those names, I think they're probably the most interested in Robert Covington, which I actually think would be a mistake. I love Robert Covington, and I think he's a phenomenal defender. He would immediately slot in as probably the second or third best defender on our team, maybe even higher. But what does he truly... Obviously, our biggest hole is shooting, so what does he add as a shooter? How much... what is his benefit of having Robert Covington over Mike Scott when it comes to shooting? The answer is not much. Robert Covington is shooting under 35% from three this year. That's not someone who's going to slot in and drastically make a difference in terms of having an extra shooter on the court. I think some of the other guys, they're just doing their diligence. Glenn Robinson, Etuan Moore, Marcus Morris, Andre Iguodala, I don't think they're truly in on these guys. I really think Iggy's going to end up on an LA team. Malik Beasley's interesting because he's young. He's 23. He's shooting 40% from three. I don't know if he's proven enough to be a standard, contending team as a veteran shooter. He could totally flop as the years go by. The guy who really interests me is Burtons. He's shooting 43.4% from beyond the arc right now on a terrible team with the Wizards. I mean, it's him and Bradley Beal and then nobody. He's got no one creating shots for him. He doesn't have an elite coach setting screens and running plays for him. And as much as Brett Brown irks us at points, one thing he did a phenomenal job of with J.J. Redick the last 2 years was putting him in positions to take threes and probably having him shoot the ball too much. With Burtons, you could literally slot him in as your taller bench version of J.J. Redick. Have him play 12 minutes a game, 15 minutes a game, and say, hey, bud, we're going to run you off screens for 15 minutes, and every time you get that ball, you're shooting. Every time Simmons kicks you, you're shooting. And it could be such a cheap trade where you package Zaire Smith, Mike Scott, and either 2 second-round picks or a super irrelevant first-round pick at 2022, and the Wizards would do it, and we would get a shooter. We would get one of the best shooters in the NBA right now, and he would just run around the court shooting threes. And that's all we would need him to do. He killed us when we played him. He absolutely killed us. And he's not some huge, crazy defensive liability. He's on the taller side. He's listed as a power forward. He doesn't play power forward, but he's listed as a power forward. So he's not going to... It's not like adding J.J. Redick in the sense of, this is another guy we have to worry about on the defensive side of things. There's no problem. You add him to the roster, you let him run around screens, and you let him shoot. So do I think they'll make a trade? To go back to that question, absolutely. Who do I think they'll add? I think Burtons is the best choice. I think if I had to say who do I think they'll add 100%, I'd probably say Covington. Covington's a little bit harder to trade because of his contract. You'd have to have Minnesota eat some of that, which they still might, but it's a little bit more challenging. But I think the enticement for Brett of telling Elton Brand, hey, I've worked with Covington, I knows how he plays, he knows the offense, just give me him, that makes a lot of sense. So now, the second part of the question, what's the point? Why just bring in a, quote, just okay shooter? Why not go get a legit impact player like a McCollum or D'Angelo Russell or Bradley Beal? And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. It's just not possible. The only guy you could trade where the salaries would match up and that would even be feasible was Al Horford, and they're not going to trade him now. They're just not going to do it. He's going to be too valuable the next 2 months. And again, I think he'll play well these next 2 months. I think he will show more leadership and take that upon himself to play well. So it's just not possible. You're not going to get a guy who's making anything over 10 mil. And with Covington, he's making, I think, 11. It's going to be a little bit easier with Covington because I think Minnesota would eat some of that contract. You might be able to pull off a 3-team deal. You're not going to be able to swing a deal where you trade Zaire Smith and Mike Scott for some CJ McCollum. It's just not going to happen. So why bring in just an okay shooter? Well, to kind of counter that, Burtons is not a just okay shooter. He's a very good shooter. Even Malik Beasley, he's an above-average shooter. Even a guy like Glenn Robinson, he's an above-average shooter. They would immediately be one of the best shooters on our roster. That's what's important. Even Covington, although I don't think he solves much, he's still a better shooter than Kyle O'Quinn, I mean, he still gives us more than Raul Neto. These are guys who have played important minutes for us before. Why not upgrade them? Why bring in an okay shooter? Well, why not bring in an okay shooter? Obviously, I want an above-average shooter. That's why I'm more interested in Burton's over the rest of them. But why not? If you can sell your late second-round picks over the next couple years to bring in guys who can contribute right now when you're trying to contend, you absolutely do it. There was a point when the Sixers would hoard these second-round picks. That point is long gone. Sell the picks, get players you know can come in and contribute, whether it's a shooter or a better defender or someone who can play backup center once in a while. Like, yeah, go make the trade. I mean, I know Marcus Morris was another name thrown around. He could play backup power forward. Like, why not? If they can come in and space the floor just 5% better than the current guys, yeah, go make the trade. Why make the trade? Because it helps our spacing. It makes our team better. But that's all we have today. It was a lot to talk about, obviously. A lot to go over. I'm sure the trade rumors will continue to pick up as we get closer to the deadline. I will do my absolute best to stay on top of them. Again, I'm David Esser, Sixer staff writer with the Philly Sports Network. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's going to be at PhillyInsider99. Go give me a follow. You can shoot all your questions over there, and I will absolutely get them on the podcast. Or I'll answer them on Twitter for you. If you want to find me on Facebook, it's just going to be David Esser. I also have a Facebook page, David Esser Sports. Find me on there. Check out some of my work on Philly Sports Network. Check out some of my other fellow Sixers writers' work on PhillySportsNetwork.com. Again, thank you for listening. Episode 2. Still working out a lot of the kinks. But I'm pleased. I'm happy that you guys are listening. We did over 130 viewers last week, which is incredible to me. But, shout out to the Sixers for giving me a lot to talk about. Thank you guys for listening. Signing out.